Hi, Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't know what's happened with my camera. Just let me sort that out. Done. That's a bit better. Oh, it's so lovely to
That's
speak to you in person after all those videos.
I know, I'm so happy to be speaking to you. I'm just laughing because I have a new microphone and I have a new second screen, and I was fiddling this morning and I was looking at the same types of pictures you were, like, upside down and
Where even is that camera?
I know, it's never easy, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, but worth it once we get it all set up.
I'm just thrilled to be talking to you and hearing your story and meeting you and all the things. So thank you for making the time.
Oh, you too, you too. It's very exciting.
It is exciting. So, for folks listening who don't know who you are or don't know who I am, I'm Jenny Nash. I'm the CEO of Author Accelerator, which is a book coach training and certification company. And Jessica Bull is one of our brand newly certified book coaches and also has a debut novel. I want to get the title right. Miss Austen Investigates the Hapless Milliner,
That's it.
with an exciting entry into the publishing universe. You had a big auction and a six-figure deal, and the book's coming out about a year from when we're talking right now. So
That's right.
that's who you are. So I want to just start by talking about you were a librarian. You were trained as an English, you studied English literature and trained as a librarian. And I just want to hear about that. Why did you think that was what you wanted to do?
Um, so like most writers, I've loved books forever and even more really loved writing my own stories since I can remember. And then I was very lucky when I was still at school, I actually got a job in my local library, which was fantastic because I got to do all kinds of really fun things like organise the kids' summer reading scheme. And I got to talk to people about books all day. So I'm very nosy and I love it when people come in and take out their selection. And I'll be like, why are you reading all those crime novels? Are you going to frighten yourself senseless? Or there'd be the men and women who came in and got like 8 romance novels, and then 3 days later they'd come back and get another 8 romance novels, and I'd be like, how do you find the time? But it's just lovely talking to people about books all day and working with kids and getting them interested in reading. So I carried on doing that job all through school and then college and then university. And then when I graduated, I carried on doing it full time for a couple of years. And then I actually moved across to the House of Commons Library, which was a whole kind of different arena. But that love of working around books and helping people to find out the stories that interested them kind of never went away. It was always there.
I love that. What kinds of books did you love to read when you were a child?
So I was a big Judy Blume fan. I
Oh
think those were
yeah. Who wasn't? Really?
exactly, exactly. Those were the ones when the first kind of books that I couldn't wait to finish. Like I just couldn't kind of put them down. The first ones that kind of struck a chord. And then I remember going to secondary school and I was struggling with reading a little bit. Then I was quite young and my English teacher gave the class The Colour Purple, and I
Oh,
think I was only about 12 or 13,
uh,
and Alice Walker's The Colour Purple,
sure.
and the main character in that is only 13, but she has this kind of huge challenges and has to grow up really fast. And I think that was the first book that really grabbed me by the heart and said, reading can really kind of change who you are and show you a life that otherwise you wouldn't understand. So yeah, I think that was the first kind of grown-up book I read. And then I
Oh,
went on to read the classics, really. That was I kind of set myself a goal of working my way through the classics, and kind of being a very nerdy teenager, thought that it was my responsibility to do all the Brontes, etc.
I love that memory of Alice Walker. When did you first, since we're going to talk about this later, when did you first encounter Jane Austen? Do you
So I'm exactly the right age to have watched the 1995 Pride and Prejudice when Jennifer Eel and Colin Firth emerged out of that lake. And I think I'm not the only Janeite whose love of literature and was born in that moment. Um, so I liked Pride and Prejudice. I loved that series. I'd watch it with my mum on a Sunday night, and then I'd go into school the next day, and I would try and distract my English teacher from whatever boring text he was trying to teach us. It was probably Dickens or something, which is great, but just not the same. I try and distract him by talking about the Jane Austen adaptation that had been on the night before. And eventually he said, look, if you're really interested in Austen, go and get out Northanger Abbey and start at the beginning and read her books that way. Don't go straight to Pride and Prejudice. So I read Northanger Abbey, and it was that speech that the narrator gives, where she says, like, what is a novel? Only a novel. It's only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed in the best chosen language. And I remember it was like this girl, this teenage girl, because she was only a teenager when she wrote it, had reached across 200 years of history through the pages of that book, and just kind of slapped me around the face almost to wake up. And like I just felt that she really, and I think a lot of us people who love Austen feel this way, she really understood everything that I was feeling at that time, and she felt like she spoke to me personally. And I think that's like the amazing thing about her, is that no matter what age, no matter what culture you come from, she still makes you feel like she's talking directly to you. So that was it. And then that was, it kind of crept up on me slowly. I didn't realise quite what a Jane Austen fan I was, but for the rest of my life until now, I just casually read all of her works, read the biographies, read the letters. If I went to somewhere in England where she'd lived or she'd visited, I'd go and see her house. I'd go and see where the adaptations were filmed. Um, so, and then I think in 2020, when life got difficult for everyone and everyone was trying to go for their kind of things that made them happy and made them feel comforted and made them feel safe, I really lent in, and I found the amazing kind of Jane Austen community on social media, and I'd start listening to podcasts and attending online lectures, and that's when it really, really took off. And I so I didn't think I'll write a novel about Jane Austen and sit down and do research on her. I accidentally did 25 years of research on Jane Austen and, then, and then needed a vehicle to express all those thoughts, feelings, questions, opinions that I had about her and her work.
Wow, what a story. So the novel that you ended up writing has Miss Austen as the protagonist. It's a mystery series, it's murder mystery series. It's set in Regency England. So these are a lot of very interesting choices that came together for you. How did that come about?
So I I kind of read and watched as many things featuring her and like an imagined her as I could. And yet I never really found that narrator of Northanger Abbey. So I, to me, she's so much fun and so lively and so happy. And I don't think she regrets anything. I think she lived her life to the full, and she made a really bold choice about how she did that. And I was always kind of chasing her, and I never found her. So I realized, I think I was listening to lots of Hamilton, and I thought, and I was thinking about how Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's made essentially a tribute to Alexander Hamilton, but he's found his own way of doing that, like his own in of doing that. And I thought, like, how can I find my way in to doing that? So once I realized I wanted to write about her and imagined her, the idea was so big and so intimidating and so terrifying, I couldn't really look straight at it. I had to kind of sidestep my way in. So I wrote a novel based on a character who was loosely based on her. So she was a rector's daughter. She was born in the same year. And it was one of those, what I now think of as a practice novel, where I make every single mistake that a new writer can make. So it was a mashup of genres. It was romance and mystery and crime. And it was dual timeline and it was multi point of view and it was really rambling plot. It wasn't plotted very tightly at all. And it didn't have a very satisfying ending. It was just all over the place. You're recognizing all those.
I'm just laughing so hard. Did you know all these things while you were doing it, or did you only
Yeah,
know this?
I was being really ambitious and writing
Right,
something brilliant. Ex
right.
and it was I didn't really have an excuse. It wasn't the first practice novel I'd written. Like I had a few under my belt by then, but I was trying to pull it back after that, and I was talking to my writing buddy, and I was saying, look, what I really wanted to do was take a character as wonderful as Jane Austen and send her out in the world and give her a chance to fall in love and give her a mystery to solve with her just all round fabulousness. And my writing buddy just said, I think you should just write that, Jess, because that sounds great. And my first thought was, well, that's ridiculous. No one's going to read that. That's crazy. That's just too out there. But I discovered two things about Jane Austen's life in my research because then of course the seed was sown. Even though it was ridiculous, the idea was there, and they started kind of the creative kind of juices started flowing. So there were two things. There's one that her aunt, so Jane Austen has a wealthy aunt called Mrs. Lee Perrott, and she was arrested and charged with shoplifting in Bath in 1799. And at that time, the penalty for shoplifting anything, for stealing anything over a shilling, was death by hanging or transportation to the colonies, so to Australia's Botany Bay for 14 years. And she was tried for that. Yeah. And she was found innocent, luckily for her, but it was a kind of big family kind of scandal that upset them, and had a deep impact on Jane's writing because from then on she wrote much more serious novels and she didn't kind of write the outrageous, silly stories featuring lots of crime that she did as a in her juvenile work. And the other thing was George Austen. So Jane had a brother, the second brother, George Austen, who had some learning difficulties and he had epilepsy. And the traditional narrative is that he wasn't part of her life. Um, but I don't think, knowing what a close family the Austens were and how they would do anything for each other, even when the brothers were, sorry, can you hear my dog?
Oh, it's cute.
So knowing how close they were and how they do anything for each other, that story never felt right and never sat right with me. And they supported him. He lived with a local family and they supported him all his life. And when he died, on his death certificate, he's listed as a gentleman. And there's another strange thing in that Jane knew sign language. So three of her letters, she talks about talking with her hands. So all those ideas kind of came together, the wanting to write him back into her story, because I think he'd been, with the best intentions, written out to protect his privacy and to protect the family's privacy at a time when people who were different weren't necessarily embraced, even though the Austen family had a lot of people who were different and they definitely embraced them. Um, and this idea that you could face the death penalty for stealing something more than a shilling. So all those ideas kind of came together. And then I found a letter from Jane's father where he was describing George Austen. And he said, at least we have, they were kind of realizing that he was going to need to be cared for his whole life. And they said, at least we have this consolation. He can never be a bad or wicked child. And it was that overriding love from a family for its most vulnerable member that kind of planted the seed. Well, what if that most vulnerable member was accused of committing a crime? Perhaps then Jane would be prompted to interfere and solve that mystery. So with the hapless milliner, what happens is that she is only 19 and she's at a ball and she's trying to get Tom Lefroy to propose, and everything is everything you want from a bright, sparkling Austen drama. And then suddenly the body of a dead young woman, a milliner, is discovered bludgeoned to death in a linen closet, and everything changes. And she's thrust into that murder mystery, trying to solve it. And then when Georgie is implicated in the crime, that's it. She's got to solve it. She's got 6 weeks to solve it. Otherwise, he's going to go to put on trial for not her murder, but stealing her necklace. And yeah, that's it. Ticking time bomb. Off she goes.
Wow. So it really strikes me in listening to you describe your creative process, both the teacher that led you to Jane Austen and your writer friend who affirmed the story that was bubbling in your heart. It strikes me, well, two things. You asked you listened to help, so you got advice or you got a direction or you got guidance and you listened to that. And then secondly, those things led you closer to your own core or your own idea or your own thing. And those two things tend to be tricky for a lot of writers. It takes a lot of writers, sometimes they never do it, where they really listen to their own voice or their own, this is sort of a wild idea that you had, and when you describe it, it just feels like, well, of course this is the story you had to write. Do you feel that sense of, I don't know what I'm trying to get at, inevitability, or did those people that speak to you really ring true in your head at the time?
So I made a bold decision, I think, in 2020 when I kind of like I'd wanted to write. I didn't know what to write for a long time. I'd wanted to write. I had so many ideas. In my heart, I knew I wanted to write historical fiction, but I was too intimidated and I didn't really know how to go about that because how do you do that? Like, do you need to go to university and become a history professor? How do you do that? Um, and I'd had some feedback much earlier in my life, which had kind of stalled me. So I'd kind of retracted from my dream. And then when the pandemic happened and I sort of woke up and thought, hang on a minute, everything's changing and we could all get wiped out in a minute. And I haven't written that book. I still haven't written that book. I always thought I would write that book and get it published, but I haven't. What have I been doing with my life? So when I realized that it was time, I couldn't put it off any longer. It wasn't going to write itself. I was going to have to work really hard to make it happen. I deliberately tried to open myself to as much feedback as I possibly could and to build a network of writers around myself to sustain that because so much of it of writing you do it on your own and it's impossible to sustain and it's impossible to learn anything that way. And the feedback I had, I'll tell you, was that, and this was a long time ago, like a decade and a half ago, and at the time I couldn't do anything about it, but it was from an agent, not my agent now. And she said, look, you can write and your description is really good, but you just don't know how to structure a novel. And I thought at the time I just had young children and I just wasn't in a place to do anything with that. And the world was a different place. If you wanted to do that kind of thing, you had to go and do an MA and you had to do it in person. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the money. But 2020, suddenly everything's online and I can learn how to do that from home. So I threw myself into it. So I joined the writing community on Twitter. I did various online courses. I listened to podcasts. I just did everything that I possibly could, and I shared my work with as many people who would who would read it. And it's really embarrassing to think of it because it wasn't this work. It was like work that was, like not on this level. But that's how you learn, isn't it? That's how you learn. You have to do that to learn. So looking back now, it all feels inevitable, but it was the result of, putting my big girl pants on
Yeah. Yeah.
and exposing myself to that judgment and that feedback, and doing the classes and really thinking about the advice that I got, and then putting it into practice. I think, like, it's really easy to look at a published book and think it's just sprung, like, fully formed a piece of art, but that's not how it works. And the other reason why I wanted to write about Jane Austen is that because I find her life story so inspiring. Like, it wasn't easy for her. She worked really hard to write those novels at a time when, she didn't have a home, she didn't have any independence, she didn't have any authority. Um, and her family and friends really sustained her. So she would read her work to them and gauge their reactions, and her brothers wrote. And we're not all lucky enough to be born into the Austen family. So I wanted to kind of recreate that kind of network, and that's really how it's happened. And yeah, I'm really grateful for that experience, and
Oh,
glad
that's
that it's finally
beautiful.
come through.
Well, I know that you you use the inside outline for something. I don't know which novel, and I think you were introduced to that through Susie Vidori. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So that was one of the online courses that I did. I did CD's boot camp,
Hmm.
which was great because I did some ones in that were British based as well, and they were all like quite academic. And then I did Susie's that was quite holistic, and it was like, oh, this is like a warm cuddle of a writing course. Like, she's really going to push me, but she cares about, like, my aims as a person and what this means to me and what I'm trying to say and what my dreams are. Wow. But I used the inside outline to plan this mystery because I'd done that practice novel, which was a big monster, and I didn't want to create another monster. I then
Yeah.
had to kind of peel back. And I think mystery, it has to be well plotted to work, because you've got the story that you're telling, and then you've also got the story that your sleuth is uncovering. And the inside outline works really well for that, because so much of it is what goes on in Jane's head as she discovers this young woman's death, and then she tries to figure out, like, how it could have come about, and she reads all the clues and she puts the ideas together and she tests her theories, and she goes from, like, consequence to consequence to consequence. So the great thing with the inside outline was that I could just see all of that come together, in terms of, I could have these action scenes where you get everything that you'd expect from an Austen style novel. So you get the glamorous ball, you get the carriage ride, you get the silly clergyman, you get the handsome young gentleman who's, like, ready to sweep you off your feet. And then inside her head, I can have her, like, formulating all these ideas about who's killed her and why, until she gets, like, closer to the truth. So yeah, for mystery especially, I think it really, really works.
Oh, I love that. And so Susie introduced that to you and helped you understand that tool, which I love. And Susie, we're talking about Susie Vidori, and her class is called it's called
Wicked Good Fiction Boot
Wicked
Camp.
Wicked Good Fiction Boot Camp, for those listening. And she too is a Author Accelerator book coach, and she's very passionate about the work, and I'm sure you got that from her too. Um, well, I love that tool helped you. I'm so glad. And the so you sold the novel. Well, you presumably you got an
So
agent
it's
and
Yep, I got an agent. I got the best agent in the world. So I got Juliet Mushins, who is Richard Osman's agent. So the Thursday Murder Club mysteries, which are very big in the UK, and I think they're big in North America as well. Um, so yeah, that was a real kind of dream. I had a few agents request the manuscripts, and then like, I thought, well, I have to then send it to my dream agent, and that nothing's going to come with that. And then she came back within 24 hours and was like, "Send me the rest." And then within a week, she was like, "Right, come into the office. I'll ply you with books, and let's talk representation," which was amazing. And then she helped me develop it. And then, yep, it sold to Penguin Michael Joseph in the UK and Union Square and Co in North America, and so far to 12 other territories around the world, which is really exciting.
And counting. And it's going to be a series, is that right?
It is going to be a series, yep. So both Penguin and Union Square and Co have bought two books, and for me, they are not retellings of Austen's work, but I am looking at the same themes, and in a way, they're kind of shadow books. So this first book is a kind of shadow book to Northanger Abbey, where obviously young Catherine Morland is seeing murder and monsters everywhere she goes. So yeah, it's a series.
That's so exciting. So, I have so many questions. So, uh, have you begun the second book then?
Yeah, I have. So yeah, I was very diligent, and I drafted the second book, a rough draft, um, while it was on submission. So while it was, with agents, I got straight to work planning the next one, and I'm really glad I did that. And lots of people say don't do that because, like, your publisher or your agent will have opinions about your second book. But also, I know that lots of authors get really nervous and intimidated about writing that second book. So having a first draft, even though it's messy and it needs loads of work, and obviously both my agent and my editor are going to have something to say about where I go with it, but just having a messy draft is like a comfort blanket.
Yes,
It's
yes.
great. Yeah.
Did you feel at this point that you knew better how to structure and shape and plot? Do you feel like you've learned something?
I think I've learned a lot. So I've done the first round. So I've done for two rounds of edits with my agent. And then I've done one round of edits with my publisher. Um, so I definitely feel now that I know more about how to structure it. But I think the thing with writing is that you learn every book
Yeah.
you write. I think it's the thing about being an artist is that, like, if you're doing it right, you'll always kind of feel like the next one kind of is more of a challenge, and then hopefully is better than the previous one. And then when you start the next one, you'll be like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing again. I have to learn all this and kind of really work hard and until eventually you think that one's better and you're embarrassed about the one that you did before." And I think that's that's just how it goes, I think, as you kind of
Yeah.
grow. Yeah.
Yeah. And somewhere in this story from starting in 2020 till when we're speaking now, at the very start of 2023, you took Author Accelerator's
I
uh,
did.
book
Yeah.
coach
So
training
that was
course,
my Yeah, that was my 2022 project. Yeah.
and this came on top of all kinds of other courses you've taken and learnings you've done and podcasts you've listened to and all of that. So what drew you to that course in particular?
So, as I said, I'd had some feedback earlier in my career, which had really kind of stalled me. Um, and then I'd created this network. And one of the things that I'd done when I was trying to build a network of writers around me was I created a writing group. And I know you've got strong opinions on writing groups, Jenny. Um, but I've created this online writing group of these amazing other historical fiction writers that I'd met on a course, and we wanted to during the course we'd all given each other's feedback, and I wanted to carry that on because I'd found it really encouraging and really sustaining. um, but I wasn't very confident about giving feedback, but because of my kind of days working in IT, I knew how to kind of like host a group and run a group and to get everyone together. So I was like, right, okay, I'll volunteer to do that part. And then I really wanted to give feedback and to help others and to kind of accelerate their learning in the way that my learning had been accelerated in the last few years. But I was also really conscious that that's a huge responsibility and that it's really easy to get it wrong and then, just put somebody off doing this because, you're bearing your soul as a writer. It's just really hard. So if you get feedback that's not helpful and kind of hampers your development, that's a really upsetting thing to do. So I knew that if I was going to help others, then I wanted to do it in a structured way. And having worked with Susie and having known how useful her feedback was, I then took a look at what qualifications she'd done, and that's what led me to Author Accelerator. Really was knowing how useful she'd been and how inspiring she'd been because it's that like telling you about kind of hacks in modern publishing, like what works, what doesn't work, what the cliches you need to avoid, what the mistakes people make, and then those really useful kind of practical tools like the inside outline, and then having that open spirit so that you you ask people what they're trying to achieve. You give them those right open questions that gives them the space to make that kind of discovery that I made when I was thinking, okay, so ostensibly I want to edit this novel, but really, is that what I want to do? So maybe I want to write another novel. Maybe I've got that Jane Austen novel inside of me that I'm too scared to write. So the right questions and the right kind of encouragement can really help a writer to find their voice. So having watched her do that, I thought I'll go down that route and I'll make sure that if I'm offering encouragement and support and feedback, I'm doing it from a place of authority rather than just inflicting my own tastes and opinions onto other people.
Wow, that's powerful. Um, uh, I'm nervous to ask the next question, and I do want you to be honest. Did the course give you what you wanted it to?
Oh, absolutely, of course it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, oh
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So it's lovely to have a framework to work from. So the thing that I really loved was the hierarchy of editorial concerns. And like it really made me think about our writing group and how I could manage it and how I could make it more useful to other writers because that idea that you don't even bother worrying about the spelling and the grammar until you've got the principles of your story in place and looking at it like that suddenly like it's not an enormous terrifying task. You can look at a piece of writing and you can kind of peel it back and look at the fundamentals and keep working on it and keep working on it and keep working on it until you get to the point where you worry about the spelling and grammar. Maybe one day. I don't think I ever get there. I do, but but there's so much more to it than that. It's like what are you trying to say, and what is the point of the story, and where's the conflicts, and where are the stakes, and what is going to make someone pick up this book and find it a satisfying read. Yeah. Yeah, so it was lovely and I did the practicals with some of my uh, friends from that writing group who I'd met on the first course. So it was really lovely. So one of them, when we did her agent pitch, she's an amazing writer. I can't wait to see her writing published one day. And she'd queried a few times and not got anywhere, but after we looked at that together, she's had 2 full manuscript requests, which was really exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
love your
and
smile right now because isn't it? Well,
yeah.
I'm going to ask, I'm not going to lead the witness. How does it compare to help somebody achieve their writing dream to your achieving it your own self? Can you make
Oh,
that
it's
comparison?
lovely. It's like it's like having like little children, isn't it? That, suddenly like they, to see it's lovely because I really believe in her work and I think her stories deserve to be out in the world. And yeah, it's just really, really lovely. It just feels really like a real kind of generosity of spirit to see that work. Because I think, like good writers are generous, and it's not a competition. Like the more great stories and the more great books out there, the better, because people just like feed off each other, and they feed off each other as each other's excitement. Um, and we learn from each other, and we develop, and we write in response to each other. So yeah, it's really satisfying to see that happen.
I love that you said that did you say real writers are generous, or you said something, serious
Yeah,
writers are
yeah, the
generous?
best ones. The best ones
The
are.
best writers are generous. Well,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of the reason why I always do say that I to beware of writing groups, because oftentimes they're the least generous place to be. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you've created an incredible group, and I know people do create incredible writing groups. I'm well aware of that, but a lot of them do so much damage because there is this sort of competition or sense of scarcity, or as you say, people don't know how to give feedback, and it's just damaging. And if you step out of that, I think sometimes you do find this just incredibly generous place. So I love that you've made a writing group that feels like it is generous. That's
Yeah. I
so
think we were fortunate because we'd done an online course together which had involved giving feedback, and part of that was learning how to give feedback. So the ground rules were set by someone in authority. So it was Curtis Brown, who's a British agency living
sure.
in North America as well. Yeah, so it's Curtis Brown, um, and part of the course was like how to give feedback, and yeah, that really helped.
I love
I think
that.
I think if you just started on your own, then, like with a random bunch of people, and also being the same genre really helps as well, because you're coming from a place of authority about what the genre expectations are. But yeah, just a random bunch of people kind of strung together, especially if it's, over the internet or something, then you're exposing yourself to some quite savage and ungenerous feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are now working as a book coach and formally coaching other people, and who are you focusing on? What kinds of writers and what kind of writing?
So I'm very interested in historical fiction, obviously, and I'm also very interested in mystery, um, and I'm also a huge romance fan. Um, so those kind of three areas, so mystery and cozy crime, whether it's contemporary or historical, and the same with romance, and then all kinds of historical fiction, so all eras. I really love that kind of like world building element that you have to do with historical fiction. Um, so yeah, those are my three kind of big pots.
And how are you envisioning balancing your writing work and the demands of the book coming out with book coaching? I'm curious how you're thinking of all those activities and how they go together in your mind.
And so I'm still really new, so I'm still building my client list, and the book, like it's killing me to wait until 2024. Why does everything take so long?
Yeah.
But I know that it has to take that long, until the book comes out. So like I'm not like overwhelmed at the moment in terms of responsibilities in terms of promoting the book, and I'm still building up my client list. So at the moment I'm in a very kind of luxurious position of just having my own time to organize and not many conflicting demands. Um, and being able to organize my own time is the best thing ever. So being able to take my barky dog for a run whenever I want to, and then like book clients in when it suits me and them, and being able to kind of maybe use the mornings when my brain is kind of really fresh to read and do that concentrated work, and the afternoons to do the more admin sides of the work. So it's really lovely at the moment. I can just organize everything myself. Um, and looking at other people's work definitely encourages and sustains me to look at my own work. So I think, being a writer can be quite lonely. You're in your own head a lot of the time. So it's really nice to have an opportunity to talk to other people about their work. And then it's often when you're thinking about somebody else's work and how you can help them, that the solutions to your own kind of writing questions come to you. So really keeping that kind of story structure fresh in my mind and interrogating somebody else's novel to see, is there enough tension? Does enough happen? What's the pacing like? Will make me think, well, actually, I'm saying this to her, but I've let things get really sloppy. What am I doing? I'm going to have to go and look at that. So yeah, it's a really nice kind of symbiotic relationship. I think they both help each other.
Well, it sounds like you've landed on a really happy career place in your life after the pandemic here, or maybe because of the pandemic in some ways, it sounds like. Um, do you do you miss being a librarian, or I know you've done other work in your life too, or do you?
Yeah. So I'm the one thing that I missed. So I was a communications consultant after becoming a librarian, and I had like a team of people that I worked with, that I developed, that I coached. And I missed that initially, and it was missing that that kind of led me to build this network and led me into coaching, really, because I couldn't like coach people about how to do IT communications anymore. And I missed that kind of relationship where you help someone achieve their potential, um, and that feeling of being useful. So so I don't miss it. That's awful,
Well,
isn't it? I don't miss
mm,
it.
I would
Yeah.
really love to see your inside outline or a version of it. If you would be willing to show that to me, I would love to see it
Oh my
for
goodness.
the.
Well, the problem is, Jenny, is that it's 20 pages long. So you're gonna
No, that's not a problem. I'm just finishing a course that I'm making for the book coaches on revision. It's called the 3D revision plan. And
Uh-huh.
I actually made the inside outline for revision. I originally made it for revision. And when you're doing that, you absolutely have it be 20 pages. I've had writers I've coached who've had longer inside outlines because it's containing the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it makes
Yeah.
absolute sense that it should be
Yeah.
longer. I'm very strict in the beginning just to put a constraint on it, but very quickly it's going to grow, right? So you don't have to
Yeah.
apologize for 20 pages.
And it probably was about 10 pages to start off with. But yeah, since I've grown it, and I use it when I'm planning this second novel and drafting it. Like, I've drafted it first and I have my inside outline, and all the things that come to me in the meantime that I know I need to do to correct the plot, they're all shoved in there. And so that, like, as I go through, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to, do that point about like this kind of twist, or that kind of like comment and that idea that comes to Jane there. So it is very much like a living document for me, and it helps me, because you panic and think, because it's so big, you panic and think, I'm going to forget that. But if you can just shove it in there, then you know that you're going to come to it when you're revising that scene, and then
I
you can fix it.
I love that. That's exactly why I made it. I always use the term, it's like an external hard drive for your story, and you just put everything in there
Yeah.
and use it. Well, I'm just really happy to speak to you and excited to see your book coaching business grow, excited to see your book come out. I know it's a long, long wait, but
I'll send you
hopefully
a proof.
you'll have a lot of fans when it comes out, and it'll be worth it. Worth the wait. So thank you for
Thank you.
chatting.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
I'm sure we will chat again.
That would be awesome. Thank
Okay.
you.